Good morning, everyone. I wanted to thank everyone for making it to this work study information session in partnership with the Financial Aid Office at UCR as well as the Career Center. Um, I'm actually going to quickly introduce myself and then I'll hand it over to Monica and Tammy just so they can give you a better idea of what their role is when it comes to the work study program. So as I mentioned before, my name is Denise Hilvet. I'm the industry outreach specialist, specifically for our government education, nonprofit, and arts industries. And then in addition to that, I co-facilitate the work study program with our financial aid office. So I'll actually hand it over to you, Tammy, to quickly introduce yourself, and then we can hand it over to Monica.
Okay. I'm Tammy Disney. I work in the Federal Work Study Office, and I am the one who processes all the onboarding contracts, onboarding paperwork. Well, I submit these tickets for the onboarding paperwork, and I process all the timesheets for the students. When you get those lovely emails from me saying, please turn the timesheets in, that's me.
All right, thank you, Tammy. Tammy is definitely an amazing partner, and I'm grateful to work with her. So I'll hand it over to Monica.
Hi, good morning. My name is Monica, and I am the Assistant Director of Customer Service, but part of the areas that I help manage is work study on our end. So Tammy and I work closely together to make sure that everything gets, ready and processed for everyone to be able to participate.
Yeah, thank you for that, Monica. So I'll actually get us started. If you're new to work study and, you're definitely in this session to kind of get a better understanding, you're definitely in the right session today. So a little bit more about work study. If you're not familiar with it, it's actually a federally funded government program for students that could obtain an award, a financial award, whether it's working on or off campus. Obviously, colleges and universities have, different procedures on how to go about this. At UCR, we actually do welcome off-campus employers, hence why you're all here today or possibly watching this recording. And then work study is actually an award to students that does not have to be repaid. So a little bit about that. And on to the next information. So who hires work study students? So we actually, again, partner with our on-campus employers. So within UCR, they can definitely offer a work study position to students that are eligible. However, not all campus jobs are actually work study. And then just a little fun fact, and this is something that we'll go over, is that for us, we actually use Handshake as our primary platform to actually post these positions so students know, how to go about that application process. When it comes to our off-campus employers, we strictly work with local school districts as well as nonprofit organizations. This year, of course, if you're on this call, we actually sent an invitation out to folks, if they wanted to learn a little bit more and be part of the process. And all off-campus employers have to meet a certain criteria in order to even go through the approval process in order to start hiring work study students. And that's actually something that we'll go into detail today as well. And just as an FYI, if you just joined late in the game, please know that the slides, the recording, and also any infographics that we mentioned throughout the presentation will be shared afterwards. So hopefully by the end of this week, you'll receive all of that information in case you miss a detail, because there is going to be quite a bit of information shared today. So one of the things that we definitely wanted to go over was the types of work study jobs and classifications. So you'll actually see four main classifications here. You'll see community service, you'll see America Reads, America Counts, and then university work study. Just for the sake of time, I'll kind of go over the university work study one because that wouldn't necessarily apply to this group of folks. This is typically for our on-campus departments. Essentially, this would, consist of office, clerical, administrative support, for our on-campus departments, you'll see the split there, and we'll go over a little bit more what the split means. And Monica, feel free to jump in if you need to clarify anything at any point. So this would actually consist of an F classification. So those letters are very important, especially when it comes to once you get to the point of actually posting a job on Handshake, that's WorkStudy, we actually have to go in there and review and make sure that it meets federal guidelines. So if at any point you see that the title of the job or the job posting has either a C, an A, an M, or an F, it's because this is what we actually classified it as. And this is going to determine whether or not your department or your organization will be invoiced, which again, Monica will go over this information at a later time. And if you can hear that noise, that's actually the thunder and lightning that's happening in my house. So I apologize for that. So then let's go over to one that actually really many of our partners may use, which is the C classification, which is referred to as community service. This actually includes positions that primarily service the community as opposed to the agency. So any like tutoring positions, mentoring positions, childcare providers, those are just some examples that could possibly fall under this. And so what this means is that the WorkStudy program pays 75% of the student's salary, and then you as an organization would actually pay the remaining 25%. So that would be under the C classification. For the A classification is actually America Reads, and this allows your organization to hire reading tutors, kinder through 6th grade at no cost. The job description would entail support within the subject of reading only and this specific grade level. And I'll go into a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. For this actual classification, the WorkStudy program actually pays 100% of the student's hourly rate and up to the student's allocation. Similar to the A classification is actually M, which is America Counts. And this is more specifically for math. And the grade level ranges kinder through 9th grade, and it would be at no cost. So again, the job description would need to entail support within the subject of math only and within a specific grade level. Many times we get some job descriptions where they mention math, but then they also mention other subjects. If that is the case, then we would totally go back to the point of contact and let them know that we wouldn't be able to approve it or classify it within America Counts if it has any other subjects or if it's supporting students outside of this grade level range. And for this specific classification, the WorkStudy program also pays 100% of the student's hourly rate and up to the student's allocation. So hopefully, again, these are the splits for the upcoming academic year of 2022-2023. This could always vary and change on a year-to-year basis. So that's what it is for this upcoming year. And again, we'll save time for questions. Monica, I see you unmuted, so feel free to chime in.
Thanks, Denise. I just wanted to say that the F classification is possible for off-campus sites. It's probably just not as common because usually the sites would prefer a position that is fully covered with WorkStudy or that has just a smaller percentage, excuse me, that would be covered by them out of pocket, and having the WorkStudy program cover a little bit more. So just wanted to say that it is possible if you needed a position that would do more like office or clerical work, social media type stuff, that would likely fall into that classification. But it is appropriate for an off-campus site to have that.
Thank you, Monica. Appreciate that. And all right, so dates and deadlines before we get into the nitty-gritty of the agreement process. So just to kind of give you an idea, so this year, as of August 22nd, once the agreement process is actually ready to go, and workstudy job postings will be live on Handshake as of August 22 of this year. And what that really means is that students can actually begin to apply for their work-study positions at that point. With that said, they can begin applying for the positions as of August 22nd, but their eligibility period begins as of September 19th. So at that point, students are able to work up to 19 hours per week. And I'm not sure why the screen looks a little off. This actually pertains a little bit more for our on-campus department, but we are actually having an on-campus student employment fair, which will be October 6th. And then during the winter breaks, the amount of hours that students can actually work is a little slightly different, and the time frame is December 12th through the 22nd. And they could actually work up to 39 hours for winter break, given that classes are not necessarily in session. And then for the following year in 2023, during spring break, again, if classes are not in session during this time, which is March 27th through the 31st, students are able to work up to 39 hours for that spring break. And then we typically conclude the work study eligibility period, and the last day where a student can actually use their work study funds would actually be June 9th of 2023. Monica, anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, on here during those breaks, when we're saying that students can work up to the 39 hours, you just want to be mindful that you're tracking the hours to be able to know if the student still has any remaining eligibility, especially if they start early on. So if you happen to be in a position where you're hiring a student as early as our fall quarter starts, or the work study eligibility period begins in September, late September, if you're using your student regularly and averaging 10 to 15 hours per week, you just want to be mindful that they would still have remaining eligibility at that point when it comes to those winter or spring breaks. But then if you also just happen to hire someone new closer to the break time, then yes, they would have more remaining eligibility during that period. So just what we'll talk about and what sort of information and resources you'll have later will really help you understand how to keep track of those hours, and how to kind of even know how many hours a student would have based on the total amount of allocation that a student is given. So I don't think we put numbers in here at the beginning, but most of the time when one of our work study students gets awarded or gets provided because they qualify for work study, they might get about $2,000 for the entire year. How they use that is really based off of what job they have. So some of them could earn that entire $2,000 just in the fall quarter if they're working a lot of hours. But if they're only working a couple of hours a week, then they could likely prolong it. And so they'll have, you could probably have them for longer, but just because they're working fewer hours. So again, that's just kind of what would go into something you would want to consider when you're determining what you want your student to do, and then what time frame you might need them for.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica. And actually, Monica, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk a little bit more about the off-campus employer agreement process.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Denise. So what this all kind of boils down to is being able to start the process to participate in work study for the upcoming school year. So right now, you all would have gotten an invitation to submit the program intent to participate form. That should have automatically given you an email, but we'll kind of break down the steps in just a second here. But the email contains a DocuSign packet, which really includes everything that we're trying to work towards here with the agreement. So the contract between both your site and the university. And so it happens to be that, we'll have someone who is authorized to sign off from the site on that contract. And then our director of financial aid, his name is Jose Aguilar. He would also go in and sign off on that form. And then you or whoever is listed as the authorized signer on the contract through the DocuSign packet, they would be the ones to get a complete copy of that agreement. But you would really want to wait for us to also send you an email, because we would give you some next steps, especially on how to post positions in Handshake. And then that's where you can kind of get the process started. But right now, kind of rewinding just a little bit, you would have gotten the invitation to participate again for the upcoming school year. We do have a priority review deadline this year. And really the purpose of that is because there's a couple of things that need to be set up in order for that to kind of go through the normal process and to have you all ready to go. So by the time that students can view those work study positions in Handshake, that it is, at that appropriate time. Again, if you can't meet that deadline, that's not a huge concern. It would mean that part of the process for you and being able to get your positions posted and then later approved in Handshake could be a little bit longer or take a little bit longer. So we do want to try to use that priority review deadline of August 15th for this academic year for anyone who wants to start, especially if you're trying to hire students in the fall quarter. So now a little bit more about that DocuSign packet. So on the form, you're listing out who you want to get the DocuSign packet sent to, because that's what's going to include the contract. So we do want the sites to upload certificates of insurance for workers' compensation and general liability. So those are some of the requirements that we do have for the contract itself. I think Denise's computer must have shut down. So let me share the slides here. Give me just a second. I heard a lot of thunder on her end. That was kind of crazy. It was sprinkling over here. I'm in Moreno Valley, but it looks like for her it was much louder. Okay, hopefully you guys can see the presentation. Okay, so this is where we were at. So, part of that agreement process where you're looking at the contract and signing off on it, we do need certificates of insurance. And then again, waiting to receive a formal email from our offices to ensure that it is something that has been approved. So here's what I meant a little bit more about the DocuSign process. So the intent to participate form. So that's what you would have gotten already sent to you. If you are interested in participating, we would like for you to fill out the form with the names of the individuals who can add information about the site itself, because you'll have to fill out what we call an employer profile. Provide copies of that insurance certificates, and then an individual who would also be authorized to sign the agreement, to sign the contract. So we want to make sure that it's going to the right people. If you happen to have signed or filled out the form and you need to change individuals because maybe they're not authorized signers, or it just has to go to somebody else, I think the best case would be to just fill out the form again and tell us so we can cancel the old one that was sent out. So that's how it'll go off. And then over to the right, this is where you will have, this is a sample email that comes from DocuSign. So it's actually coming from my account. So you'll see that I sent it to you, but it's automatically going off and being triggered when you fill out the participation form. So that's just what it looks like. And then within that document, that's where, those who were identified to fill out information about the site, they would be asked to upload. And so you would have to click on the little paperclip here to add your attachments. And the person who is considered the authorized signer, then they're just using DocuSign to electronically sign the contract. And then eventually it's going to come back to us. It'll go to Tammy to review to make sure all the paperwork is complete and the certificates of insurance are for the correct year, that they're not expired. She'll review it and then it'll route to our director for his signature. And then again, once everything is done, you will get a copy of the completed agreement when it's signed by all of the parties. And so just wait for us to send you a formal email that announces that you are ready to go, because that's also going to tell you how to post those positions in Handshake. All right. So as far as it goes with school districts and different nonprofit organizations, there is a little bit of a different process for our school districts, just because we want to ensure that every site at the individual school district is able to submit a form that we call the Exhibit B, because that's telling us who at that individual site rather than at the district level. So who would be responsible or who would be a contact person for us to try to reach out to, especially when we're talking about, submitting timesheets or late timesheets. So we would want to know who should we contact when we need to reach an individual site and not a district contact. So that's what the Exhibit B form would tell you. So within that notification that you would get that says you're approved to participate and how to post the job descriptions, the school districts would then also be asked to submit an Exhibit B form. So that way each individual school site would be able to do that. So we know who they are and who we could reach out to for some support if needed. We also kind of state here that the work study postings will not be approved unless an agreement and an Exhibit B form are submitted. So all in all, we just want to make sure that the documentation is there, and then that's where we can start approving the job postings, or that Career Center and Denise are able to do that. If there is a new site, there might be some work on the accounting side that would need to be set up. And so because of that, it might take a little bit longer. But otherwise, most of us should be returners. And so everything should technically be ready, unless you have a new site who hasn't participated in the past, then we might need to kind of work through that. For the nonprofits though, if you're a nonprofit not at a school district, then what you're doing is already going to give us all of the information that you need. So your participation form would have been everything that we needed originally. So there wouldn't be an extra step for you. And again, though, we would need to make sure that the agreement is submitted in order and approved in order to have your job postings approved by the Career Center. So the next step is really just a quick summary on how to hire a UCR work study student. So what you'll do after the approval process, so of course you did the agreement, you got the email that says that you've been approved, and then you get the go ahead to start posting those positions. So you would want to make sure that you register with Handshake, create your account there to be able to post the job. You would then take care of the interviewing and recruitment process. So we leave it up to the sites to be able to coordinate that. You could ask whichever questions you need to in the interview process. But we also clarify with students and try to make it a point to them that they have to tell you as the supervisor that they are eligible for work study. So this is pretty important, especially since sometimes we have students who work multiple jobs. They might have a job that is off campus and one that is on campus. And if they're using work study in both jobs, that's going to mean that their work study eligibility runs out faster. So you want to make sure that your student is telling you if they're working in other jobs. That might be a good interview question for you to ask. Do you have any other jobs? Are they work study jobs, or do you plan to have another job? Even in our own office, we have, about 14 student workers, and some of them are involved in other areas. So we always have to make sure that we're coordinating and that we're knowledgeable of how many hours they're going to be working with us versus the hours that they're working with the other department or, their off-campus work study job. So that's important to ask. Otherwise, with the interview, again, up to you on what you want to ask. You will be their supervisor at the site. The hiring for the off-campus sites, our university completes, so they're officially hired by UCR through you. So then, what that means is the university will pay them, will front whatever their wages are supposed to be. If you have, approval for a job that is for the America Counts or the America Reads program, then that's where we would pay 100% of the wages up to the work study allocation. If you decide to keep them on once they've exhausted their work study, then that would be something that you would have to pay for out of pocket at 100% rate. You could also, though, ask us if you, or your student, direct your student to ask us if they could get an increase in their work study. We are allowed to increase as long as the student has any remaining eligibility or still has financial needs. So we could do that as well. But even then, that might just be another $2,000. And depending on how much you're working them, you might have them for a couple of weeks or a longer amount of weeks if they're not working that many hours. So again, that's probably more information about the interviewing and hiring process. But again, we leave that to you to conduct. The onboarding and the payroll procedures, more of what I was just talking about, again, in the sense that UCR will hire them, we will pay them. We then bill sites. So if you did have positions that are outside the 100% fully funded ones, like the community service one or a federal type of work study position, then we would bill you at the rate that you are responsible for, and then give you, a month to pay that off. So we would send an itemized invoice that explains how much is responsible or how much the site is responsible for, the pay period, which that money was being charged for. And then again, that will go to the sites that, or the site supervisors for the information that we have on those Exhibit B forms. You could then route it to whoever it needs to go to at your site, maybe someone who is in charge of more of the fiscal side of things, but that's what would happen. And then again, timesheets. So timesheets are due every 2 weeks. So students are paid on a bi-weekly basis. And so they'll get that, paycheck to them. And that's how they earn the funding. Considering the employment dates, that really just means going back to the dates and deadlines, a slide that Denise was going over, that is considered, and that you are using their hours to, your best benefit. And then that you're monitoring them as well, because once they reach their allocation, again, you could ask us to see if we can increase their work study, and maybe that could help prolong how long they stay with you. But if we're not able to do so, or if you don't want to, go through that process, you don't have to, then that's where either you can keep the student and pay for them at 100% their wage rate, or that's where we could then tell the student that that's it. They've exhausted their allocation. You would have that conversation with them, and then we would need to know. So please notify us if you are offboarding the student, so we can, kind of go through the process on our end to offboard them as well. All right, so I think Denise is back. Denise, we heard a lot of thunder and rain over on your side, so we figured that's probably why you got dropped off.
Yes, I'm really sorry. And I'm actually on my personal hotspot, so I'm hoping it's good enough. But technology, what can we do? All right, so moving on. Thank you, Monica, for really, providing all of that knowledge. And for folks on the call, we just thought this would be a good opportunity, particularly If you are going to be sharing this information with any of, like, especially if you're a school district and you have to share this with other sites on how to post a position on Handshake. So you'll see here, this is just an example of what it would actually look like on Handshake. And one of the things I want to showcase is the job title. So this is actually what it looks like once we've reviewed it ourselves. We have to make sure that the job description or the job title actually has the classification on there. And again, this is all really based on the job description. The other piece is where it says job type. You'll see there that if, this is more relatable to our on-campus departments, but this sometimes happens with our off-campus employers, that they'll actually label it as an on-campus student employment, but that wouldn't be the case. Given that you're an off-campus employer, you would want to label it as job, because that actually helps distinguish what we have going on, particularly at UCR, and the folks that we partner up with as off-campus employers. And then most importantly, for our team to review as a work study position, where you see, is this a work study job? You definitely want to make sure that you check this off as yes, because if you do not check it off as a yes, it actually goes to a different reviewing bin, and we actually make sure to prioritize work study positions. So if at any point you feel like, okay, this has been in the queue for a long time, what's the case? Perhaps it's because it wasn't labeled properly as a work study position. And then lastly, again, where you see apply start, because work study positions will not be viewable as or until August 22nd, you want to make sure that you set a date, anything either the day of or after that, because if there's an earlier date, it will just be in the pending bin until that date arrives. So we can go on to the next slide. All right, so in this section, which this is where you would actually add your job description. Of course, it gets a little cut off here, but this is just an example. We do ask that, the job description is substantial and detailed. Again, going back to the classification, if it's in America Reads or in America Counts, you want to make sure that the subjects are identified, and you also want to make sure that the grade levels are identified as well. If there's anything outside of that, it will not get approved, and we'll have to go back to square one and reach out to the person that posted the position to make sure that that information is edited properly. One thing that I didn't highlight on here, but I do want to put it, I want to mention it, where it says, how many students do you expect to hire for this position? You do not have to post, if it's the same job title, you don't have to post it multiple times. You could literally just state, we're looking to hire 20, 25 students. It's very easy in that sense. Also, one tip that I highly, highly recommend is for folks to actually put what the hourly wage is. It's for many reasons, particularly right now. I'll be extremely transparent. I think because we all know the job market, I think it's been, a little bit of a challenging time for employers to really hire folks on. So I really recommend for folks to actually put how much they're paying on an hourly rate there, and it can really help with your recruitment efforts as well. The other piece that we wanted to highlight is you'll see a piece where it says allow remote workers. If this is something where you feel like it's going to either be virtual or hybrid, please make sure that you check that off. That's extremely beneficial for us to really have an understanding. Another thing that I would recommend as well, not just checking this off, if for whatever reason you have a hybrid opportunity and you want to add that into the job description, I would also highly recommend for folks to do it in the job description as well. I think more and more now, not just students, but I would say even folks that are looking for job positions are really looking at that piece, not just how much it's, they'll be getting paid, but also, is it virtual? Is it hybrid? Is it completely in person? What are the expectations? So I would definitely recommend for folks to add that piece on there. And again, this is just kind of an idea of what the job posting can look like. Going back to the job description, if we see anything that's literally just a sentence, it's definitely going to go back to you to review and make sure that it has a substantial and detailed job description, because a one sentence job description is not going to meet federal guidelines for sure. So this is just an idea to help folks as they begin posting positions, but I'll turn it over to Monica again.
Thanks, Denise. So this next step is really just to kind of give you a preview of what's to come once you actually have identified a student that you want to hire. So what's going to happen after you get your, agreement approved, you're posting jobs, you now have interviewed someone, and now you're at the point that you want to hire a student that you have identified. So the next step is that the student is going to fill out a form for us, and that form is going to start triggering a new DocuSign packet. So you're probably thinking, oh, a couple DocuSigns. Yes, we have a couple DocuSigns that would be routed just so that way we have everything done electronically. So again, just a quick little blurb here. So we do say that we want the student to provide to you during the time of interview their work study eligibility notification. So this is more for you to know that for sure the student is eligible for work study. Not that we've seen students, hide things or not share this information with you, but this is your way to verify that they do qualify for work study. And so they should be providing that to you at the time of the interview. When you do offer the work study position to the student, they will start the process for onboarding and they will fill out what we call the work study new hire form. This form, as I mentioned, would trigger a DocuSign, and the DocuSign will now include what we call the work study student employment contract. And so this provides some information to both the student and you as their supervisor, because it will route to you as well for signature, but it will tell the student just some responsibilities that they should keep and maintain as they are working in an off-campus or even on-campus department. And so this is going to be initiated by the student. They're the ones who are responsible for writing down who their supervisor is, along with the supervisor's email. And that's how it'll go to who they have identified as the supervisor. So just as an FYI, if you are maybe doing the hiring, but a different colleague of yours is going to be their supervisor, make sure that they know that. Maybe when you are hiring them or offering the position to them, please let them know who they are to report to in that case. And then once that is done, it comes back to us. Specifically, it'll go back to Tammy, and then Tammy will be the one who will start the process to initiate the onboarding. That can take a couple of weeks, meaning up to 15 business days. We're hoping that that can go down just slightly, but right now there's a couple of items that kind of make it last the 15 days. This, though, it could be a little bit extended if the student that you're hiring is not doing some things on their end as well. So they have to do an onboarding appointment with one of our members in our division to complete the onboarding process. So if they maybe schedule an appointment and then have to reschedule or miss their appointment and have to reschedule, then that could prolong it just slightly as well. But just as a FYI, it is taking about 15 days from the point that we receive all of the information for the student to be fully onboarded. but we notify you as the supervisor and also the student through what we call a letter of clearance, and that gives both the student and the supervisor the information that they need to know that the student is ready to start, and to start creating that schedule with them to know when they should be reporting to you, and how to report for work as well. So that is the last green light that you need to then have your student ready to go, and then they can start working with you. And I'll turn it over back to Denise.
All right. So again, we understand there was so much information shared, but we really just wanted to share this up front and then share some resources that you can always go back to in case there's like pieces here and there you may have missed. So this is just an example of our infographic that we have put together for our off-campus employers that could really make it easy at any point, like where you're at on, or what stage you're at in the process of hiring the student. And it really walks you through step by step. Again, we'll be sending an email with this infographic, with this information, so that way, you know, it's very detailed, to the point, and you could always share it with folks that within your organization that you feel would benefit from this. And then on to the next slide. I just wanted to highlight a few other resources that would be very beneficial. Again, we are recording this and we'll be sharing this recording afterwards. In addition, we're currently working on putting some video tutorials, like, you know, making it like literally 2 minutes or less. If at any point folks need to share, you know, how to post a job on Handshake, you know, just those little minute things that can be very helpful. And then in addition, we're going to have virtual employer drop-in office hours this summer as well, in July and August. We figured that especially before the priority deadline, if you have any questions, this would be a great time. Like if you want to just stop by for 5 minutes and just have a quick little question, this would be a great time for you to stop by at this time. Again, we'll send all of this information in an email. And then another thing that we really want to do this year, so we did do it with our students last year. We had work study newsletters where if you were a work study partner, we would actually help promote any work study hot jobs that there were. And we would send these out, you know, pretty much like twice a quarter for students. But we also want to do this for our on and off campus employers as a way to stay updated with any critical information and so forth. And yeah, those are some educational resources that we'll be sharing. Something that we're currently working on as well. We're currently updating our website, so please bear with us. More to come on that. All of our resources will be living on there as well, if at any point you need to reference any of this information. And then when it comes to work study job posting approvals, I will say, particularly during peak season, it could take up to 5 days for our team to approve positions, because we don't just review work study positions, but we also review non-work study on-campus positions and with off-campus employers as well. So thank you in advance for your patience. And then one thing that we want to just emphasize, I'm sure you all know at this point, but just, you know, making sure that everyone's aware, effective as of this year, January 1st, the minimum wage for employers with 26 or more employees will increase to $15 an hour. And then for 25 or fewer employees, it is $14 an hour. If there are any changes with minimum wage for the upcoming academic year, we typically like to send a formal update and announcement to our off-campus and our on-campus departments. So yeah. And I think we're going on to our FAQs. And I think, Monica, you have that first question. Again, we know it's a lot of information, but once we get through all of this, if you are still left with questions, please ask us. So Monica, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So the first one is really just, now that you've hired someone, we're assuming, we've been through this whole process. What happens after they start working? So as mentioned briefly a little bit ago, we will onboard the student and then pay the students bi-weekly. So they're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. We will then bill the organizations who have positions that require billing. So if you had a position that was classified as a community service position, a federal position, then we will do that as well. So that's where we would send an invoice that describes to the sites the pay periods that the student worked, the hours that were charged to work study, and then what was then charged to your department or your site. So that's the split, right? So we talked earlier about the splits and how if it's a community service position, Work Study pays 75% of the student's wages, but then the remaining 25% are covered by the site. So that's where we would then perform that billing and show you that, oh, maybe the student worked, a couple of hours on a certain pay period. Work Study covered 75% of the wages of those several hours, but then your site would be responsible for the remaining 25. So we try to do that at least on a quarterly basis. And so then once that bill is sent out, then you have 30 days to pay. As I mentioned, it is a bit itemized because it gives you the breakdown between how many hours were charged to your site after Work Study paid the initial piece of it. And yeah, I think really just making sure that you understand that part of the process, because I think this is the part where it gets a little bit more blurry and maybe we didn't have, a strong communication before, but we did want to start off this year and kind of letting you know what typically happens, the fact that students are being paid bi-weekly. Tammy then, helps in approving those timesheets. But she also needs the site's supervisors to sign off on those timesheets as well, meaning that we get your approval because you're telling us that, yes, the student said that they worked 8 hours and you're signing off that they actually worked those 8 hours. So we need that approval to come from you as well. But otherwise, that's what that billing side of the Work Study process looks like.
Thank you, Monica. I think I might have that next question. So, okay, so a frequently asked question that we receive from folks is like, if your organization is interested in posting work study and non-work study positions, like how would you get started? So anybody that is wanting to post a position has to have a Handshake or a user account. Again, this presentation is going to be shared because there's actually live links that send you directly to these resources. In addition, your organization and your school district should already have a company profile. If they don't, you may want to determine internally like who would want to be the owner of the account, because the owner of the account will definitely be responsible on adding any specific staff members that can have access to this information. And then also there is a step-by-step on how to go about posting a job as well. So those are just some ways to actually get you started on Handshake. And I know some folks will feel like, oh my gosh, it sounds like so much, but I promise like the platform is pretty easy to use. I think once you get really acquainted with it, it just becomes, second nature on how to go about using this piece. But on to the next question. This is another question that we get, and it might be a little, or it's actually going to be the other one, but how do we make sure our job description meets federal guidelines? I kind of reviewed this a little bit, but again, I just want to emphasize like your sample job title, particularly if you want it to be reviewed as work study, it would be appreciated if you could just put work study at the beginning of the job title, the position. If your school district, you would want to put the specific school site and the school district as well. Again, I provided an example there. So it would be Work Study, America Reads, Tutor, Live Oak Elementary, Tulane Unified School District. Of course, you don't see the classification because that's for us to review and make sure that we add that ourselves. Here's the sample job description. Again, going back to America Reads or America Counts, you want to be as specific as possible, because if there's any information that's missing, it won't, once we review, it most likely will not get approved, and we'll bounce back and connect with you all to make sure that information is properly set up. Again, if it is work study, you want to make sure that it's checked off in the basic section on Handshake, listing the hourly wage. And then another thing that we definitely want to emphasize is that it is highly recommended to see what your position was classified as after the job description was reviewed and approved, because again, this is what will determine what your organization will be invoiced. So that way you don't feel like there's any surprises, or if you have any questions, you can always follow up with us. And then on to the next question. So this one is a little similar to like the first question that I was addressing about wanting to maybe hire students that are both work study or non-work study as well. So can you use the same posting? Honestly, Handshake is very user-friendly. So yes, you can use the same posting. The thing is, you'll want to duplicate the job posting and then label the other one as its non-work study. Because what happens is that when you label something as work study and we then approve it, that posting will only be viewable to students that are work study eligible. Other UCR students that are not work study eligible, they will not be able to view that posting. And right now it might feel like, okay, this is like a step that I might not even think about far in the future. But again, if you're looking to hire for maybe a similar job position, or you want to not do work study whatsoever and you want to post a other position on Handshake, you can do that. So I just want to emphasize that piece. And then I think I have one last question, Monica, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so how do I provide a student with a copy of their work study job description? So like you or someone within your department will need to upload the job description as part of the DocuSign process, or provide the students with the copy of the job description saved as a PDF. It's very easy. Once you have an approved job description on Handshake, you'll want to right click, select print, and then you'll want to save it as a PDF. I want to go over this piece because what sometimes happens is that students will then go to, Tammy, they'll want to like upload their job description, but in reality, what happens is that sometimes the employer or even the student will actually save a job description that has not been approved yet. So you want to make sure that it's not on pending, that it's been approved. You'll see that on your end. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to emphasize this piece. And Monica, I'm not too sure if we have any other, that last piece I would say is more so for on-campus department. So yeah, so I'll hand it over to Monica to kind of go over like who to contact, especially if you have very specific questions. And yeah.
Yeah, so really, there's two different points of contact for you here at the university when you're working through this program. With financial aid, you would want to let us know if you had any questions about work study eligibility, any allocation adjustments. So again, if you saw that your student was close to reaching their limit and you wanted to ask if they could get an increase, you would want to do that with us. And then any paycheck and timesheet questions that would also come over to our office. But with the Career Center, they would be good to get your questions answered. If you had anything related to the job search process or the job posting process, any sort of questions about the interviews, or trying to understand what sort of questions you should be asking if you're trying to hire your students. And then on the student side too, right? If they needed any assistance with some of their resume or cover letters. And then overall, just all those resources that Denise was talking about earlier, those will be posted on the Career Center's page for WorkStudy. And so they'll have the dates and the deadlines, a recording of an orientation session or info session, and then also the infographic that will explain just what the process looks like in a kind of shortened and condensed way for that as well. And so there's our email, at least for financial aid, we are, open Monday through Friday on our phone lines. So you could reach us between the hours of 9 and 4 o'clock. There's a phone tree that kind of lists out different options, and WorkStudy is one of them. So you could, press that number to get transferred to Tammy in case that was something that you needed by phone. But otherwise, I think we are here at the end. So thank you everyone for joining us. And I think we have a little bit of time for questions too.